you ever imagined what it would be like to be trapped in the pitch black of a cave for 12 consecutive hours at the age of 67, with only your war dog for company? Sounds like a movie set, doesn't it? But I can guarantee that when you experience it firsthand, every second feels like an eternity, and every heartbeat echoes like a drum in the haunting silence of the rock. My name is João. I'm 67 years old, and what I'm about to share with you now happened just 3 months ago, during what was supposed to be a simple 12-hour survival challenge exploring the caves of the Mantiqueira Mountains. Have you ever been there? That moment when you realize everything has spiraled completely out of control and there's no plan B? Because that's exactly what happened to me and my partner, Rex, a German Shepherd dog trained for extreme situations. During my 15 years dedicated to survival challenges in extreme environments, I've faced scorching deserts, dense forests, and icy mountains. As a former military man, I always believed I was prepared for any emergency. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the silent terror of being completely isolated deep within the earth when an unexpected landslide blocked our only known exit. What you're about to discover may completely surprise you about the limits of the human body and the incredible connection that can exist between a man and his dog in life or death situations. When I say war dog, I'm not referring to your average pet. Rex was specifically trained for survival operations, and his perception capabilities in hostile environments go far beyond what you can imagine. Stay with me until the end, because I must tell you how a 67-year-old man and his canine companion developed survival strategies that even I didn't know were possible. The temperature inside that cave plummeted to dangerous levels. The darkness was so dense I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face, and the sound of the wind through the cracks in the rock created a haunting symphony that tested my sanity with every passing minute. Have you ever wondered what your reaction would be like when you realized you were completely trapped, cut off from the outside world, relying solely on your survival instincts and the loyalty of a trained animal? During those long hours, I discovered reserves of courage I never knew existed within me, and learned lessons about partnership and mutual trust that completely changed my perspective on extreme challenges in old age. What happened in those 12 hours transformed not only my view of survival, but also the limits we impose on ourselves as we age. Rex wasn't just my companion. He became my lifeline, my warmth, my compass, and eventually, my salvation. The way he reacted to the first signs of danger made me understand why war dogs are considered elite soldiers in the world of extreme survival. But before I reveal the most shocking details of this experience that nearly cost us our lives, I need to explain exactly how we ended up in that seemingly impossible situation. Okay, now that you understand the magnitude of what happened to me in that cave, I need to introduce myself properly so you can understand why this experience was so powerful and why my words carry the weight of real experience. My name is João Silva. I'm 67 years old, and my life journey has taken me down paths few men of my generation dared to tread. I was born in 1958. At a time when adventure and survival weren't trending topics on social media, but rather matters of life and death for those who chose to serve their country. At 18, I joined the Brazilian Army, where I spent the next 25 years of my life fully dedicated to military service. During this time, I wasn't just another soldier following orders. I specialized in special operations, hostile environment survival training, and leading troops in extreme situations. During my military career, I participated in more than 40 operations in various Brazilian biomes. I spent weeks in the Amazon facing suffocating humidity, poisonous insects, and navigating unfamiliar rivers. I survived exercises in the Pantanal during the dry season, when temperatures exceed 45 degrees Celsius and drinking water becomes more valuable than gold. I braved the biting cold of the southern region during winter operations, where I learned that the human body can withstand far harsher conditions than we imagine, as long as the mind remains strong and focused. My primary specialty was survival training for elite troops. For 15 consecutive years, I was responsible for preparing young soldiers to face situations where death was always just a few feet away. I taught hundreds of soldiers how to find water in deserts, how to build shelters with natural materials, how to identify edible and poisonous plants, and most importantly, how to maintain their sanity when all seems lost. But my experience wasn't limited to theoretical knowledge and controlled exercises. During the 1980s and 1990s, I participated in real-life rescue operations in natural disaster situations. I was present during floods in the Northeast, helping to rescue families stranded for weeks. I participated in search and rescue operations in the Serra de Mar Mountains, searching for lost mountaineers in extreme weather conditions. Each of these experiences taught me valuable lessons about the fragility of human life and the importance of adequate preparation. At 43, when I retired from the Army with the rank of Major, many of my colleagues chose a quiet life, dedicating themselves to family and safe hobbies. I chose a different path. The adrenaline of military operations had become an essential part of my identity, and the idea of spending the rest of my life watching television and playing dominoes terrified me more than any dangerous mission I had ever faced. That's how, exactly 15 years ago, at the age of 52, I decided to turn my passion for survival into a new career. I began offering private survival courses to civilians interested in learning military techniques. I soon discovered a growing demand for authentic adventure experiences, especially among men of my generation who missed real challenges in their lives. During my 15 years as a civilian survival instructor, I've organized and participated in over 200 different challenges. I've led groups of stressed-out executives to survive 3 days in the Chapada Diamantina with minimal equipment. I've organized week-long expeditions into the Cerrado, teaching retired business people how our ancestors extracted water from plants and hunted small animals using improvised traps. I've led urban survival training, preparing entire families to face emergencies in large cities. Each experience taught me something new about the limits of the human body and the importance of mental preparation. I saw 30-year-old men panic after going 6 hours without food, while 60-year-old women demonstrated impressive physical and mental resilience when faced with real adversity. I learned that chronological age has very little to do with survival ability, and that life experience can be a far more important differentiator than physical strength. Throughout these years, I've always worked with trained dogs as part of my expeditions. I discovered early on that a well-trained dog isn't just a comforting companion in isolated situations, but can literally be the difference between life and death in real emergencies. Dogs have senses far more acute than ours, can detect weather changes hours before humans, identify water sources at impressive distances, and are capable of finding escape routes that would otherwise go unnoticed. Rex, my German Shepherd, is not just my personal companion. He is the result of 3 years of intensive training specialized in survival operations. I adopted Rex when he was just 2 months old, still in the imprinting phase, the crucial period during which puppies develop permanent bonds with their owners. From day one, Rex was exposed to controlled, stressful situations, gradually accustoming himself to loud noises, complete darkness, extreme temperatures, and long periods without food or water. Rex's training followed military protocols adapted for civilian working dogs. During the first year, we focused on developing basic obedience and developing specific commands for emergency situations. Rex learned to identify and alert to the presence of fresh water, detect dangerous changes in ambient temperature, find alternate routes when main paths were blocked, and remain calm and focused even during extremely stressful situations. In his second year of training, Rex was exposed to increasingly challenging scenarios. We spent entire nights in dense forests, where he learned to distinguish between normal natural noises and sounds that could indicate real danger. We practiced search and rescue exercises in rough terrain, where Rex developed the ability to find lost people using only his scent and following barely perceptible tracks. We practiced first aid scenarios, where Rex learned to seek help and guide rescue teams to injured or endangered people. The third year of training was dedicated to honing the skills I'd already developed and creating a near telepathic communication between us. Rex learned to interpret my subtlest gestures, anticipate my needs in emergency situations, and make independent decisions when I wasn't in a position to command him. Most importantly, we developed absolute mutual trust, essential for us to face situations together where our lives depended entirely on each other. During our 15 years as a duo, Rex and I have faced situations that have tested every aspect of our training. We survived a hailstorm in the Serra da Canastra, where we sheltered for 18 hours in a small cave while tennis ball-sized rocks destroyed everything around us. We spent 4 days lost in Tijuca National Park after a landslide blocked all known trails, relying solely on Rex's skill to find food and water. We faced a flash flood in the interior of Minas Gerais, where Rex guided me through an escape route that saved our lives when the waters rose more than 3 meters in a few hours. Each of these experiences strengthened our partnership and taught me valuable lessons about survival that no military manual could ever impart. I learned that true survival isn't about theoretical knowledge or sophisticated equipment, but about adaptability, teamwork, and most importantly, the ability to remain calm and think clearly when everything seems out of control. I've also discovered that age can be a significant advantage in survival situations. Young people tend to waste energy on unnecessary movements and impulsive decisions. Older men, especially those with military experience, have developed the patience, discipline, and risk assessment skills that are crucial for making sound decisions under pressure. At 67, I no longer possess the physical strength of my 20s, but I compensate for this limitation with decades of practical experience and a situational awareness that only comes with time. My reputation in the survival world has grown organically over the years. Younger instructors often seek me out to share experiences and learn techniques not taught in conventional courses. Specialized magazines have published articles about my training methods, and some of my students have become respected instructors in their own right. But I've never sought fame or public recognition. For me, survival has always been a personal matter, a way to stay connected to fundamental aspects of human nature that our modern society tends to forget. Rex, at 6 years old, is at the peak of his physical and mental capabilities. German Shepherds are known for their longevity and endurance, and Rex demonstrates daily why this breed was chosen for military and police work around the world. He weighs exactly 38 kilograms, has muscles developed through regular exercise on varied terrain, and maintains the ability to concentrate and obey that are hallmarks of the best working dogs. Our daily routine includes at least 2 hours of specific survival exercises. We practice silent commands, essential for situations where noise can attract danger. We practice first aid scenarios, where Rex learns to retrieve specific items from my emergency backpack. We develop orienteering exercises, where Rex guides me through alternative routes using only his natural instinct. And most importantly, we maintain our synchronization through long silent walks, where we learn to communicate using only body language. Many people ask me why, at 67, I still seek out extreme challenges when I could be enjoying a peaceful retirement. The answer is simple. Because it is precisely in these moments of extreme adversity that I feel most alive and most connected to my true essence. Modern society protects us so much from natural risks that we end up losing touch with fundamental skills that define us as a species. When I face real survival situations, I rediscover aspects of my personality and capabilities that remain dormant during everyday life. Furthermore, I firmly believe that men of my generation have much to contribute to the world of survival and adventure. Our life experience, combined with the technical knowledge accumulated over the decades, can be extremely valuable in teaching younger generations about resilience, adaptability, and decision-making under pressure. Rex and I form a duo that embodies this philosophy. The combination of human experience and animal instinct can overcome obstacles that would seem insurmountable to individuals acting alone. This presentation of my credentials is not an attempt to impress, but rather to establish the necessary context for you to understand the seriousness of what happened in that cave. When a man with over 40 years of extreme survival experience and a dog specifically trained for emergency situations face a situation that nearly results in tragedy, it means we are dealing with truly exceptional circumstances that deserve detailed analysis and deep reflection on our limits as human beings. Now that you know my background and understand why Rex and I are a seasoned duo in extreme situations, I need to explain in detail how we ended up in that seemingly impossible situation in the Mantiqueira Mountains cave. This wasn't a random accident or the result of recklessness, but rather a series of circumstances that aligned in a nearly impossible way, turning what should have been a controlled challenge into a real fight for survival. Planning for the challenge began 3 months before the execution date. During a meeting with other survival instructors in São Paulo, an interesting discussion arose about the limits of human endurance in subterranean environments. A fellow instructor, a caving instructor, mentioned that most survival courses focused on open environments like forests, deserts, or mountains, but largely ignored the specific complexities of cave survival. This observation piqued my professional curiosity. During my military career, I had participated in several operations in underground tunnels and bunkers, but I had never specifically dedicated myself to studying survival in cavernous environments. The idea of developing a training protocol for underground survival seemed not only challenging but also potentially valuable for expanding my repertoire of practical knowledge. After several conversations with speleology experts, I chose the Serra da Mantiqueira as the ideal location for this experiment. This mountainous region, stretching between São Paulo, Minas Gerais, and Rio de Janeiro, has hundreds of natural caves with varying levels of complexity and challenge. Many of these rock formations were created over millions of years by the action of water on limestone and other minerals, resulting in systems of tunnels and chambers that can extend for kilometers underground. The specific cave I chose for the challenge is located on a private rural property, approximately 40 kilometers from the city of Campos do Jordão. The farm owner, a 73-year-old man named Antonio, had discovered the cave entrance over 20 years ago during earth-moving work for the construction of a dam. Since then, amateur cavers had explored the first 200 meters of the formation, mapping 3 main chambers connected by relatively wide tunnels. During my preliminary reconnaissance visit, 2 weeks before the challenge, Antonio accompanied me on an initial exploration of the cave. The main entrance measured approximately 2 meters high by 3 meters wide, allowing easy access even for people carrying equipment. The first tunnel descended at a gentle slope for about 50 meters, leading to a circular chamber approximately 10 meters in diameter with a 5-meter-high ceiling. From this first chamber, 2 additional tunnels branched off in opposite directions. The left tunnel, narrower and steeper, led to a second, smaller chamber, where the sound of running water could be heard coming from somewhere deeper in the rock formation. The right tunnel, wider and flatter, led to a third chamber that appeared to be the end of the explorable system, at least with basic lighting equipment. During this preliminary exploration, Rex displayed some interesting behavior. While I focused on technical aspects like distance measurements and assessing structural stability, Rex remained constantly alert, sniffing the air and listening for sounds I couldn't detect. On several occasions, he stopped suddenly and directed his attention to crevices in the rock face or secondary passages I had previously deemed inaccessible. At the time, I interpreted this behavior as the natural curiosity of a dog exploring a new environment full of unfamiliar odors. Now, reflecting on the events that followed, I believe Rex was already detecting signs of structural instability or changes in air circulation that my human senses couldn't perceive. Dogs possess sensory capabilities far superior to ours, especially when it comes to detecting subtle vibrations and changes in atmospheric pressure. After completing the initial reconnaissance, I spent 2 weeks meticulously planning the survival challenge. My goal was to spend a full 12 hours inside the cave, from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening, simulating a situation where Rex and I would be isolated from the outside world and rely solely on our internal resources to survive and stay safe. The planning included several different scenarios. The basic scenario called for us to spend the 12 hours methodically exploring the entire accessible extent of the cave, mapping its structure in detail, and identifying available natural resources such as water sources, fresh air currents, or materials that could be used to build makeshift shelters. An intermediate scenario would simulate the loss of lighting equipment, forcing us to navigate and survive in total darkness for several consecutive hours. This exercise would test our tactile orientation and our ability to remain calm under conditions of extreme sensory deprivation. The most challenging scenario would involve simulating a serious injury, where I would act as if incapacitated and rely entirely on Rex's initiative to keep me safe and eventually seek outside help. This type of training is essential for any human-animal duo intending to operate in high-risk environments. For all these scenarios, I meticulously prepared a list of permitted and prohibited equipment. Permitted equipment included 2 high-powered LED flashlights with extra batteries, a basic first aid kit, climbing ropes for emergencies, a whistle for signaling, clothing suitable for cold and wet environments, and enough food for Rex for the planned 12 hours. Prohibited equipment included cell phones, walkie-talkies, GPS, artificial heating equipment, self-prepared food and emergency protein bars, and any item that could overly facilitate survival and reduce the educational value of the exercise. I also established strict safety protocols that were to be followed throughout the challenge. Antonio would be responsible for checking on us every 4 hours, shouting from the cave entrance and waiting for a response confirming that everything was okay. If he didn't receive a response after 15 minutes of trying, he was to immediately contact the local fire department. Additionally, I established that if serious health, equipment, or structural problems arose in the cave, I would blow the whistle 3 times consecutively every minute, a signal that Antonio knew signified a real emergency and the need for immediate rescue. The date for the challenge was chosen based on several meteorological and logistical factors. I chose a Thursday in late March, when temperatures in the Serra de Mantiqueira region are typically mild during the day but can drop dramatically at night. This temperature variation would add a realistic challenge to the exercise without creating excessive safety risks. I also carefully checked the weather forecast for the challenge week. The weather services indicated a chance of light rain during the afternoon and evening, but nothing that suggested severe storms or exceptionally dangerous weather conditions. Moderate rain could even be beneficial for the exercise, creating more realistic humidity conditions and testing our ability to stay dry and warm. On the chosen Thursday morning, I woke up at 4:30 a.m., following my usual routine for days of extreme challenges. I started with a meal rich in complex carbohydrates and protein, providing lasting energy for the intense physical activities that awaited me. Rex received his increased morning ration, ensuring he had adequate energy reserves for a full day of intense work. At 5:15 a.m., we loaded the Jeep with all the planned equipment and began the hour-long drive to the rural property. During the drive, I kept Rex calm but alert, using specific commands he associated with the start of survival exercises. This psychological preparation is crucial to ensuring that working dogs maintain focus and discipline during prolonged and potentially stressful activities. We arrived at the property at 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes later than planned due to heavier than expected traffic leaving the city. Antonio was already waiting for us with fresh coffee and some updated information on local conditions. The previous night, it had rained moderately for about 2 hours, increasing the overall humidity in the area, but without creating significant mud or erosion problems. Antonio also mentioned that during the early morning hours, he had heard some noises coming from the direction of the cave entrance, possibly wild animals seeking shelter from the rain. This information didn't particularly concern me, as the presence of small animals is common in cave formations, and Rex was trained to handle chance encounters with local fauna. At 6:45 in the morning, after a brief final review of safety protocols with Antonio, Rex and I began our descent toward the cave entrance. The ground was slightly slippery from the previous night's rain, but nothing that posed significant difficulties for our approach hike. The cave entrance looked exactly as it had during my reconnaissance visit 2 weeks earlier. The opening in the rock remained its original dimensions. There were no visible signs of recent collapse, and the air temperature exiting the rock formation was within the expected normal range for that time of year. Rex displayed his usual pre-exercise behavior, alert but controlled, paying attention to my commands, but also processing sensory information from the environment around us. There were no signs of nervousness or reluctance to enter the cave, behaviors he always displayed when he detected real danger or abnormally risky conditions. At exactly 7 in the morning, after a final equipment check and a visual confirmation with Antonio that everything was working as planned, Rex and I entered the cave to begin what was supposed to be a controlled 12-hour exercise. Neither of us could have imagined that we would be about to face the most intense and terrifying survival experience of our combined careers. The air inside the cave was significantly cooler than above ground, as expected, but the temperature difference wasn't extreme enough to cause immediate discomfort. Humidity was also high, as expected, creating that characteristic subterranean feel that anyone who's explored caves instantly recognizes. For the first 30 minutes, everything went exactly as planned. We methodically explored the first tunnel, checking our observations against the notes taken during the reconnaissance visit. Rex remained close but not clinging, demonstrating the confidence and independence that are hallmarks of his advanced training. It was only when we reached the first main chamber that the first signs began to emerge that this day would not be just another routine training exercise, but rather the beginning of an ordeal that would test every aspect of our preparation and partnership in ways we never imagined possible. For those first 30 minutes inside the cave, everything seemed to be proceeding perfectly according to the itinerary I had meticulously planned for weeks. Rex and I explored the first tunnel systematically, me making mental notes about structural changes since my last visit, while Rex investigated smells and sounds with the controlled curiosity typical of a well-trained dog. The temperature was stable, our lighting worked perfectly, and I was beginning to feel confident that this would be another productive exercise that would expand our repertoire of subterranean survival experiences. We arrived at the first main chamber at 7:35 in the morning, just 5 minutes behind schedule. This circular chamber, 10 meters in diameter and with its high ceiling, always made a striking impression on me, as our light bounced off the rocky walls, creating dancing shadows that brought to life the mineral formations accumulated over millions of years. Rex seemed particularly interested in the acoustics of the space, moving carefully and paying close attention to the echoes of our movements. It was at this point that I noticed the first irregularity that should have alerted me to the approaching dangers. During my reconnaissance visit 2 weeks earlier, this camera had very specific acoustics, with clean, well-defined echoes that lasted approximately 3 seconds after any louder sound. Now, the echoes seemed slightly muffled and lasted only 2 seconds, a subtle difference that I initially attributed to possible changes in atmospheric humidity due to the previous night's rain. Rex, on the other hand, showed clear signs that he had detected something abnormal in the environment. His behavior shifted from exploratory curiosity to focused attention. He stopped several times during our traverse of the chamber, pinning his ears up and sniffing the air more intensely than he normally did in routine situations. In retrospect, I realized that Rex was picking up vibrations or changes in air circulation that my human senses couldn't detect. We decided to continue toward the left tunnel, which led to the second chamber where we could hear running water. During my previous exploration, this tunnel had proven stable and safe, although narrower and steeper than the main tunnel. The sound of water always reassured me during survival exercises, as it represented the assurance that we would have access to the most essential resource for our survival should something unexpected happen. It was approximately 8 o'clock in the morning when we began our descent through the left tunnel. Rex walked ahead of me, a position he always assumed naturally in unfamiliar or potentially dangerous terrain. This formation allowed Rex to spot obstacles or hazards before I encountered them, while my light illuminated the path for both of us to navigate safely. The tunnel looked exactly as I remembered from my previous visit. Solid rock walls, an uneven but navigable floor, and a steady downward slope that required no special climbing equipment. The sound of rushing water grew progressively louder as we progressed, indicating that we were approaching the underground spring I had discovered during my initial reconnaissance. It was when we were about halfway down this tunnel that I heard the first noise that should have prompted me to immediately stop my exercise and return to the surface. A dry, muffled sound, similar to the sound wood makes when under excessive stress, but clearly coming from the rock structure around us. The noise lasted only 2 or 3 seconds, but it was distinct enough to make me stop and pay attention. Rex reacted to the sound before I could even fully process it. He immediately turned toward me, assuming a high alert posture I'd only seen during combat simulation exercises or when detecting real, immediate danger. His ears were fully erect, his body tense and positioned to move quickly in any direction, and his eyes fixed on mine, awaiting commands. At that moment, I made the first critical mistake that contributed to our subsequent predicament. Instead of trusting Rex's instincts and immediately returning to the surface to investigate the source of that anomalous noise, I decided it was likely some natural phenomenon common in cave formations, perhaps thermal expansion of the rock or the movement of small animals in passages we couldn't see. During my years of military and civilian survival experience, I had learned that caves are naturally noisy environments, especially when there is running water and temperature changes. Strange sounds are more common than absolute silence, and reacting with excessive paranoia to every unfamiliar noise can turn productive exercises into unproductive experiences, dominated by irrational fear. We continued our descent, but I kept Rex close to me and reduced our forward speed, paying close attention to any repeat of the anomalous noise or other signs of structural instability. Over the next 15 minutes, we detected nothing out of the ordinary, and I gradually regained my confidence that the first noise had been an isolated phenomenon with no safety implications. We arrived at the second chamber at 8:20 in the morning, slightly late due to our reduced speed after the mysterious noise. This smaller chamber, approximately 6 meters in diameter, housed a small spring of crystal clear water that flowed from a crevice in the rock wall, forming a small natural lake about 2 meters wide by 1 meter deep. The water was exactly as it had been during my previous visit. Clean, odorless, and at a constant temperature, indicating it originated from deep groundwater. Rex drank moderately, a normal behavior for well-trained dogs who know how to conserve resources when uncertain about future availability. I took the opportunity to refill one of my water bottles, a standard safety procedure in any survival exercise. It was while I knelt by the spring, focused on filtering the water through my portable purification system, that the real disaster began to unfold. Rex, who had positioned himself near the chamber entrance to keep watch over our escape route, began emitting a low, continuous growl, a high alert signal he used only when he detected grave and immediate danger. I immediately stood up and shone my flashlight in the direction Rex was watching. Initially, I saw nothing unusual in the tunnel we'd entered. The rocky walls seemed stable. There was no visible movement of animals or people, and I couldn't hear any noises other than the familiar sound of running water around us. But Rex maintained his alert posture, and his body language clearly indicated that he was detecting something that posed a real threat to our safety. Over our years of partnership, I learned to trust Rex's instincts completely, especially in situations where his superior senses could pick up information that remained inaccessible to my limited human senses. It was when I began paying closer attention to our surroundings that I noticed the second irregularity that should have immediately alarmed me. The sound of the running water, which had been constant and regular during our descent, now showed subtle variations in intensity and timbre, as if the flow were being affected by changes in pressure or the structure of the underground channels through which the water circulated. Simultaneously, I noticed that the chamber's temperature had dropped noticeably during the few minutes we had spent there. This thermal change could not be explained by our presence or the time of day, suggesting changes in air circulation that might indicate structural changes elsewhere in the cavernous system. Rex continued to growl, now alternating between watching the entrance tunnel and directing his attention to cracks in the chamber walls that I hadn't noticed during my initial exploration. His behavior clearly indicated that he was detecting movement or vibrations coming from multiple directions, a situation that always poses a heightened danger in subterranean environments. I finally decided to completely trust Rex's warnings and began our immediate return to the surface. It was 8:42 in the morning, and our strategic retreat would still allow us to accomplish most of the planned exercise objectives, even if we couldn't explore the third chamber as originally planned. We began climbing the steep tunnel that would lead us back to the first main chamber, Rex staying ahead of me and I lighting our escape route. For the first few minutes of the climb, it seemed like we'd made the right decision and would be able to return to the surface without any major complications, allowing us to safely analyze the irregularities we'd detected. It was when we were approximately halfway up the climb back to the first chamber that we heard the noise that would completely change our situation and transform this controlled exercise into a desperate fight for survival. A deep, prolonged rumble, clearly originating somewhere between our current position and the cave exit, followed by a series of smaller noises that sounded unmistakably like rocks crumbling and crashing against each other. Rex stopped instantly and turned to face me, his eyes reflecting my flashlight beam in a way that conveyed not just alertness, but genuine concern. In all our years of partnership, I'd never seen Rex show signs of real anxiety, but in that moment, it was obvious he understood the gravity of our situation as much as I did. The boom was followed by absolute silence that lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. Then we began to notice subtle changes in the air circulation within the tunnel we were in. The current of cool air that normally flowed from the surface toward the depths of the cave had completely stopped, and the temperature began to rise noticeably. At that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that something had blocked our main exit route, likely a rock slide at the cave entrance or in the first tunnel connecting the surface to the first main chamber. The interruption in airflow and the rise in temperature were clear signs that our communication with the outside world had been severely compromised. We continued our ascent toward the first chamber, now moving with controlled urgency. We needed to personally assess the extent of the blockage and determine whether alternative escape routes still existed, or whether we would be effectively trapped until rescue teams could clear the obstacles that had formed between us and the surface. We arrived at the first chamber at 9:10 a.m., an hour and 10 minutes after hearing the initial boom. What we found confirmed our worst fears and definitively established that this was no longer a controlled exercise, but a real emergency where our lives depended on our survival skills and our ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. The tunnel connecting the first chamber to the cave entrance was completely blocked by a compact mass of rocks of varying sizes, from small boulders to blocks weighing several tons, that had been dislodged from the ceiling and walls during what had obviously been a significant structural landslide. The pile of debris extended at least 10 meters into the tunnel, creating a solid barrier that would be impossible to remove without heavy excavation equipment. Even more alarming was the fact that the landslide had completely altered the acoustics of the first chamber. The echoes that had lasted 2 seconds during our initial passage were now virtually non-existent, indicating that the space was much more confined and that our connection to the outside world had effectively been severed. Rex carefully sniffed the pile of debris, searching for air currents that might indicate narrow passages through the blockage. After several minutes of meticulous investigation, he returned to me with the body language I had learned to interpret as negative confirmation. There were no viable routes through the slide, at least not passages wide enough to allow our escape. At that moment, at 9:25 in the morning on a Thursday that had begun as a routine training exercise, Rex and I found ourselves completely isolated from the outside world, trapped in a cave with no communication and relying solely on our internal resources to survive, until rescue teams could locate and remove the obstacles that separated us from freedom and safety. When the reality of our situation finally crystallized in my mind, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. The pure, primal panic that arises when a human being realizes their life is in real and immediate danger. At 67 years old, after 40 years of dealing with extreme situations, I discovered that there is a fundamental difference between facing calculated dangers during controlled exercises and confronting the concrete possibility of death in a situation where you have no control over the variables that will determine whether or not you survive. My first impulse was to completely deny the gravity of the situation. For the first few minutes after discovering our main exit was completely blocked, my mind refused to accept that we were effectively trapped. I continued obsessively scanning the pile of debris, desperately searching for any passages Rex and I might have missed during our initial investigation. I experimented with different lighting angles, hoping that changes in perspective would reveal escape routes we hadn't considered. This denial phase lasted approximately 15 minutes, during which I wasted precious physical and mental energy in a futile search for solutions that simply didn't exist. Rex observed my behavior with the patience characteristic of well-trained dogs, but his body language clearly indicated that he had accepted our situation much more quickly than I could emotionally process it. When I finally realized that our main exit was definitively blocked and that there were no obvious alternatives to return to the surface, my body reacted with a cascade of physiological responses that I couldn't rationally control. My heart began to beat irregularly and rapidly. My breathing became shallow and rapid, and I felt a tightness in my chest that made it difficult to breathe deeply. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, making it difficult to hold my headlamp steady. The tremors gradually spread down my arms and legs, creating a general feeling of muscle weakness that compromised my ability to move smoothly. Simultaneously, I began sweating profusely, despite the cold temperature of the subterranean environment, a stress response that increased my rate of fluid loss at a time when resource conservation was crucial to our survival. The psychological dimension of the panic was even more debilitating than the physical symptoms. My mind, normally disciplined and focused during emergencies, began to produce a constant stream of catastrophic thoughts that fed on each other in a downward spiral of increasing despair. I visualized scenarios in which I would die of hunger, thirst, hypothermia, or suffocation. I imagined my family receiving the news of my death, and I thought obsessively about all the errors of judgment that had contributed to our current situation. During this period of acute panic, which lasted approximately 20 minutes, I completely lost my ability to think strategically and make rational decisions. Instead of systematically assessing our available resources and developing a survival plan based on decades of practical experience, I found myself mentally paralyzed by the magnitude of the challenge we faced. Rex, observing my rapidly deteriorating psychological state, took the initiative that literally saved my sanity during those critical moments. He approached me and positioned himself directly in front of me, physically blocking my visual access to the pile of debris that had become the obsessive focus of my anxiety. He then placed his snout on my right hand and began applying gentle but persistent pressure, forcing me to divert my attention from catastrophic thoughts and focus on his immediate physical presence. This behavioral intervention wasn't haphazard or instinctive. During our years of joint training, Rex had been specifically conditioned to recognize signs of extreme psychological stress in humans and respond with techniques to interrupt destructive thought patterns. Military and police working dogs are routinely trained to assist their human partners during episodes of panic, trauma, or mental exhaustion, and Rex was applying protocols we had practiced hundreds of times during controlled exercises. The constant physical pressure of Rex's nose on my hand acted as a psychological anchor, interrupting the cycle of negative thoughts that dominated my mind and redirecting my attention to concrete, immediate sensory stimuli. Gradually, I was able to synchronize my breathing with Rex's breathing rhythm, an emotional regulation technique we had practiced during stress management training. After about 10 minutes of this canine intervention, my breathing began to return to normal patterns. My heart rate slowed to more sustainable levels, and the tremor in my hands significantly diminished. Most importantly, I gradually regained my analytical thinking skills and began to process our situation more objectively and constructively. The first rational thought I could form after overcoming my initial panic was the recognition that Antonio, in accordance with our established safety protocols, would attempt to contact us at 10 o'clock in the morning, that is, in approximately 15 minutes. If he didn't receive a confirmatory response from us, he would initiate emergency procedures, including immediate contact with the fire department and possibly specialized underground rescue teams. This realization provided significant psychological relief, as it meant our situation would not go unnoticed and that professional help would be mobilized relatively quickly. Even considering the time required to mobilize rescue teams, assess the situation, and organize debris removal operations, it was reasonable to expect that we could be freed within 6 to 12 hours. However, this initial relief was tempered by the realization that even a relatively short period of isolation in a blocked cave posed serious risks to our survival. The ambient temperature was noticeably lower than during our entry, a result of the interruption in the circulation of warm air from the surface. The relative humidity had increased significantly, creating conditions that could quickly lead to hypothermia if we didn't take proactive measures to conserve body heat. Even more concerning was the issue of breathable air quality. With our connection to the surface completely blocked, the oxygen available inside the cave was limited to what was present at the time of the landslide, minus what we were consuming through our breathing and Rex's metabolism. Although the cave system was relatively large and likely contained enough oxygen for several hours, the concentration of carbon dioxide would progressively increase, creating risks of intoxication and compromising our cognitive abilities. After partially regaining my emotional balance, I devoted the next few minutes to a systematic assessment of our available resources to face the coming hours of isolation. My backpack contained 2 high-powered LED flashlights with approximately 8 hours of battery life each, 4 backup batteries that could extend our lighting capacity for another 12 hours, a 1-liter water bottle I had filled from an underground spring, emergency protein bars equivalent to approximately 1,200 calories, a basic first aid kit, and climbing ropes that could be useful for exploring alternative passages. Rex had enough food for approximately 18 hours, water ad libitum from the fountain in the second chamber, and most importantly, his superior sensory capabilities could be crucial for detecting changes in the environment, locating air currents that might indicate alternative exits, or identifying additional dangers that my limited senses could not perceive. During this resource assessment, I also recognized that our situation, while serious, was not necessarily hopeless. We had guaranteed access to clean water, basic food supplies for at least 24 hours, lighting capacity for a similar period, and the knowledge that rescue teams were already being mobilized. Our main threat was not hunger or thirst, but rather hypothermia and the possible deterioration of air quality over the next few hours. Rex remained close to me, maintaining intermittent physical contact that helped stabilize my emotional state. Periodically, he would direct his attention to different parts of the first chamber, investigating odors or sounds I couldn't detect. His behavior suggested he was constantly monitoring our environment for changes that might affect our safety or present opportunities to improve our situation. At 10 o'clock in the morning, as per our protocols, we heard Antonio's voice echoing faintly through the pile of rubble blocking our exit. His voice was distorted and muffled by the rock barrier, but we could clearly make out that he was shouting our names and waiting for a response. Rex and I responded simultaneously, me yelling as loudly as possible and Rex barking in a controlled but intense manner. Apparently, Antonio managed to hear some indication of our presence because he continued trying to communicate with us for approximately 10 minutes. Although we couldn't make out his specific words through the jamming, the pattern of his shouts suggested he was trying to assess our condition and possibly coordinate with others who had arrived at the scene. This rudimentary communication, though limited and frustrating, provided a significant psychological boost for both of us. It confirmed that our situation had been discovered, that Antonio was mobilizing help as planned, and that we were not completely isolated from the outside world. Rex responded positively to this interaction, showing visible signs of relief and reduced tension. After this communication session ended, Antonio apparently moved away from the blocked area, likely to organize rescue procedures or await the arrival of specialized teams. The return to silence was psychologically challenging, but at least now we knew for sure that our situation was known and that concrete measures were being taken for our liberation. For the next hour, I focused on establishing routines that would help us maintain physical and psychological stability during the waiting period. We implemented basic body warm-up exercises to combat the falling temperature, developed a flashlight energy conservation system by alternating periods of light and darkness, and established regular times for hydration and small amounts of food to keep our metabolisms functioning properly. Rex quickly adapted to these routines, demonstrating the behavioral flexibility characteristic of well-trained dogs. He naturally assumed watchdog responsibilities during periods when I rested or focused on other activities, and he developed movement patterns that maximized energy conservation while maintaining his ability to respond quickly to changes in our situation. At 11:30 in the morning, approximately an hour and a half after establishing initial communication with Antonio, we began to hear mechanical noises coming from the direction of the blockade. The sound was clearly heavy equipment, possibly tractors or excavators, beginning the process of removing the debris that separated us from freedom. These noises represented definitive confirmation that professional rescue operations had begun, and that our liberation was only a matter of time and systematic work. However, as the next few hours would demonstrate, our ordeal was only beginning, and the challenges we still faced would test not only our physical endurance, but also the limits of our partnership and mutual trust in ways we could never have anticipated during our years of training together. After overcoming the initial moments of panic and establishing basic communication with the rescue teams, Rex and I needed to implement concrete survival strategies that would allow us to maintain our physical and mental health during the undetermined period we would still spend isolated in the cave. The sounds of heavy equipment coming from the surface indicated that rescue operations were underway, but my military experience told me that removing a pile of debris that large could take many hours, possibly even days, depending on the structural stability of the area and the precautions needed to prevent further landslides. The first and most urgent threat we identified was the progressive loss of body heat. During the first 2 hours after the lockdown, the temperature inside the first chamber had dropped from approximately 15 degrees Celsius to about 10 degrees Celsius, a significant reduction that indicated a complete interruption in the circulation of heated air from the surface. Relative humidity had simultaneously increased due to the condensation of our breath and the evaporation of the water source in the second chamber, creating ideal conditions for the development of hypothermia if we did not take immediate proactive measures. Rex and I began implementing the shared body warming technique I had learned during cold weather military training. This technique, known as buddy warming, involves strategically positioning 2 or more individuals to maximize heat conservation through direct body contact and the creation of thermally insulated microenvironments. We found a natural depression in the rock wall of the first chamber that offered protection from drafts and allowed us to position ourselves comfortably for extended periods. I used my waterproof jacket as insulation against the cold rock, creating a thermal barrier between our bodies and the constantly absorbing surface. Rex positioned himself against my right side, his warm body providing direct heat while I partially wrapped my arm around him, creating an air chamber warmed by our combined body heat. This mutual heating system proved extremely effective during the first few hours of implementation. The temperature in our improvised air chamber consistently remained 5 to 7 degrees warmer than the general ambient temperature of the cave. enough of a difference to prevent hypothermia and keep our metabolism functioning at optimal levels. Rex demonstrated an instinctive understanding of this technique, automatically adjusting his position to maximize our thermal efficiency without the need for constant verbal commands. In addition to direct body warm-up, we implemented specific metabolic heat-generating exercises that could be performed in the confined space of our resting position. These exercises, based on military survival techniques, focused on isometric movements and controlled muscle contractions that increased blood circulation and internal heat production without requiring significant energy expenditure or space for movement. Every 30 minutes we performed a 5-minute sequence of progressive muscle contractions, starting with the muscles in the feet and legs and gradually moving up to the arms and shoulders. These contractions were held for 10 seconds each, followed by 10 seconds of relaxation, creating a rhythmic pattern that stimulated circulation without causing excessive fatigue. Rex naturally participated in these exercises, stretching and contracting his muscles in sync with my movements. During breaks between warm-up exercises, we focused on energy conservation techniques that would allow us to maintain our physical and mental capabilities for as long as possible. We established scheduled rest periods where we consciously reduced our metabolism through controlled breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, techniques I had learned during interrogation resistance training in the Army. Controlled breathing followed a specific 4-beat pattern. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and pause for 4 seconds before repeating the cycle. This breathing rhythm reduces heart rate, decreases oxygen consumption, and promotes a state of physical relaxation that conserves energy while maintaining the mental alertness necessary to monitor changes in our situation. Rex demonstrated a remarkable ability to synchronize his breathing with mine during these exercises, a skill we had developed over years of joint training, but which now assumed critical importance for our survival. Dogs naturally have higher respiratory rates than humans, but Rex could consciously reduce his respiratory rate to match my pattern, optimizing our joint consumption of available oxygen. Managing lighting resources became another key aspect of our survival strategy. With 2 main flashlights and backup batteries sufficient for approximately 20 hours of continuous use, we needed to develop a utilization system that would allow us to maintain adequate visual capabilities while conserving power for longer periods in case our liberation was delayed. We implemented a lighting cycle based on 30-minute periods of light followed by 15 minutes of complete darkness. During the illuminated periods, we used the light for activities that required precise vision, such as checking our equipment, monitoring our physical condition, closely scanning the camera for changes or opportunities, and exercises that required hand-eye coordination. Periods of darkness were primarily dedicated to rest, energy conservation, controlled breathing exercises, and the development of our non-visual sensory capabilities. During these breaks, Rex and I practiced communicating through touch and minimal sounds, honing our ability to coordinate without relying on visual stimuli. This practice would be crucial should our flashlights fail or our batteries run out before our release. Total darkness also allowed us to more accurately assess the cave's acoustic conditions, identifying changes in the noises coming from rescue operations on the surface and detecting any changes in the natural sounds of the subterranean environment that might indicate developments in our situation. Rex demonstrated significantly superior hearing abilities than I did during these periods, alerting me to specific sounds through subtle changes in his posture and muscle tension.